Guys, all the cars that you see in these videos are for sale on my website, www.woodsandbarclay.com. Enjoy the video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the series on the 1982 Orient Red 300 SD. I think today is going to be the final refurbishment video. We're going to do a valve adjustment and new valve cover gasket. I'm also going to install a refurbished original 1982 Becker radio. And the wood has come back from Madeira Concepts, so we're going to go ahead and reinstall the wood in the car. So let's go ahead and get started with the valve adjustment. All right, guys, for the valve adjustment, go ahead and, put a protective fender cover on there so you don't scratch anything up when you're leaning over the car. And you notice I have it a little bit off the ground on the lift, and that is because we need to put a socket down underneath on the front crankshaft bolt, and that'll help us rotate the engine to get the camshaft in the right position. Now, the tools you need, this is like a 1 1/16 socket. I have my feeler gauges here for checking the valve lash or the valve clearance. And we have a new Victor Reinz valve cover gasket. Now, the feeler gauges, if you look on your core support here, Mercedes tells you at water temp below 30 degrees, that just means a cold engine, guys. Always do this on a cold engine. Your intake, the valve lash is going to be 0.10 millimeters, and your exhaust 0.35 millimeters. It also gives you the hot settings here, but you don't want to do it on a hot engine because if it takes you a little while, the engine will cool off and it's not going to be as accurate. So just do on a cold engine. And this engine has been sitting overnight, so it's definitely cold. All right, let's go ahead and start the disassembly process. We want to pop off our linkages here and remove our valve cover. Now, guys, you've seen me do that many times in other videos, so I'm not going to go into detail about how to remove all these linkages, but you can pop off these linkages here, and you got a couple of 13 millimeter bolts here, a couple of vacuum lines that you disconnect here, pop off your breather tube and your Bowden cable, and you can remove this assembly and then easily get your valve cover off. So let me go ahead and knock that out. Here's a good stopping point here. I basically have all this disconnected. See, I've got my vacuum lines unplugged from the front of the throttle linkage area. I have my Bowden cable. That's for your transmission shifting. You can adjust the RPMs where your transmission shifts. And I have the cruise control linkage over here disconnected. And at this point, we should be able to just lift this. There we go. This is all the upper throttle linkage that mounts on the valve cover. Now, when I put this back on, I want to lubricate all these little joints or these little ball pivots, these little sockets. But for now, I'm just going to set this aside and we're going to focus on the valve adjustment. All right, now the next thing we want to do, you can see we have all this removed. Right here, there is a E-clip that holds your firewall throttle linkage to the valve cover. We want to pop that out and then slide this linkage so it disconnects from the valve cover. It's mounted right here on the side. And then we should be able to go ahead and pull this valve cover off. All right, this little E-clip right here, you can get it off with a pick, and sometimes these just go shooting across the room. And if you lose it, you can order E-clips from Amazon or get them at your local parts store. It's not a big deal. See if I can get this one off without it shooting across the room. Oh, there we go. I got it. Here we go. That's what these little guys look like. All right, let's go ahead and remove our throttle linkage. Okay, so this throttle linkage, let's see. Also, we want to take, what we want to do, we want to take, there's one more clip right here. These are strange. Let me show you this clip. These are the same clips used on the transmission shifter bushings. It's like a, let me zoom in here. There we go. See, it's like a tab that slips over the end. So you got to get a screwdriver right in there and twist it, and then this slips off. And this is a nice little tool to do that. Kent sells these out at Mercedes stores. All it is a piece of like bent wire, and he kind of shaves flat spots on both sides, and then puts a handle so you can stick it in there and twist it and it will pop loose. Let me see if I can demonstrate that. Okay, I'm really zoomed in so you guys can see this, but you can see this, you can stick it right down in the little slot like that. Let me straighten it back out here. Okay, and once you have it in there, you can twist it and it opens it up. There we go. I don't know if you can see that. See how we opened it up? And then you can slide it back and off of there. And here's what we did. We just inserted it right here. And then when you twist it, this is spring loaded. So when you twist, it opens up. Let me see if there we go. It opens it up like that. And then you can slide it off where it clips in right here. Pretty nice little tool. And guys, that tool is not necessary. I mean, you can do it with a screwdriver, no problem. All right, I think we got a little bushing down here we want to get off. There we go. That's just a little nylon bushing with a washer behind it. And now we're just going to take a screwdriver and pop off our injection pump linkage. There we go. There's our injection pump linkage. And then see how this is now disconnected from the valve cover? Now, the last thing you want to do, let's see, right here, this center diesel return hose, that's clipped in down at the bottom down here. We just want to pop that out of the clip. Okay, there we go. Now that valve cover can come off. Now, the valve cover is held on with 1, 2, 3, 4, 13 millimeters. And they're only on there with like 10 foot-pounds of torque. You don't crank these down. It's your gasket that does all the sealing. The sign of an amateur mechanic is that everything is too tight. And you don't want to over-tighten things. That's why they're so easy to get off. Now, this one back here can be a little tricky to remove. So I like to unscrew it a little bit and then get a magnet, stick a magnet on it, and then twist it off the rest of the way with a magnet. There we go. That way you don't drop it down there behind the injection pump. Same goes for this one over here. It's a little, back in here. So we're just going to screw it off there. And I'm just going to stick a magnet down there. Guys, you can get it off without using a magnet. It's just a little easier that way. Okay, sometimes these valve covers can be a little tricky to get off. Sometimes they'll hit the cruise control right here. So sometimes I'll just take this cruise control actuator off and set it aside. And I'm going to go ahead. Also, what I've done here is disconnected our temperature sensor from the thermostat. Because it's zip tied to our vacuum lines. I want this to be out of the way. And let's see how tough this one is to get off. Okay, we got it up. Now you'll see these injector diesel return hoses will often hit the valve cover and kind of keep it from coming up. I think this one's going to come off relatively easy. Yeah, nice. Get this out of the way. That injector line is right there. Come on, get out of there. There we go. Yeah, that one came off really, really easy. All right, there's our valve cover gasket. We're going to replace that. Let me go ahead and set this aside. At this point, you want to inspect the engine and take a look for any signs of damage or misuse. And what I like to do, yeah, look how beautiful that is. So here's your camshaft lobe. You see how shiny and smooth it is? We wipe off some of the oil here. See how smooth this is? That's because the oil was being changed on a regular basis and there's no scoring. When you have old dirty oil in these cars and you don't change it for a long time, you'll see little scratches or scoring on the lobes of the camshaft. And this is beautiful condition. I mean, this is, a 50,000 mile vehicle. It looks brand new in here. Here's our timing chain with our timing chain guide. There is our chain tensioner there. There you go. You can see it barely moving because it's under pressure. Yeah, this looks absolutely beautiful in here. Still has the original factory markings on the camshaft. Yeah, very, very nice. That's beautiful condition. So what we want to do a valve adjustment, and I've showed this in other videos, guys, so I'll just show how to check one of these, and then I'll proceed to do all 10 of them. But basically, for each cylinder, you have an intake and exhaust. You have 2 lobes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And in order to check the lash behind the, there's our rocker arm, and here's our camshaft lobe. You want the lobe to be on the base of the rocker arm, or the base of the lobe to be on the rocker arm, and then that's what this little gap is. 10 thousandths or 0.10 millimeters or 0.35 millimeters. The intake is 0.10, the exhaust is 0.35. So what we want to do, looks like the first one to check is going to be this one. Now, you want to rotate the engine until this cam lobe is at about the 1 o'clock position. And there's a convenient way to eyeball that. See, there's a little dot right there on the camshaft tower. So basically, you want to rotate this up until that lobe is in alignment with that little dot. See, there's one there, and there's one there. See, this one is almost at the dot right here. So actually, we're going to go ahead and check that back one first, because we have to barely move the engine to get that at the 1 o'clock position. And then we're going to go back here and put our feeler gauge behind it and check the clearance. Here's a little diagram I've been using for years. I think I got this probably like 10 years ago from Mercedes Source. You can print these out online. But here's our 5-cylinder engine, and here's the front. Right here it says EX, right there it says IN. So exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, exhaust, intake. So the very last lobe is an intake lobe. This is the one we want to check first, right back here, the very last one. And like we said here, the intake is 0.10 millimeters. So let me go ahead, rotate the engine over till that's perfectly at the 1 o'clock position, and then we'll check our clearance. All right, guys, I'm going to lay on my back in front of the car, put this on the crank bolt and turn it clockwise to rotate the engine. I'm not going to show that, but that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, I've just barely rotated the engine, and you can see our cam lobe right there is lined up with the dot, and it's basically the 1 o'clock position. So now what I want to do is go over here and get my 0.10 millimeter feeler gauge. That's the flimsy one. And we want to see if there is 0.10 millimeters of clearance back here. Okay, it's a little tight. And that's what they do. They tighten up over time. So we're going to open up that gap. See if I can show you back here. See, we're trying to slip it under there, and it won't quite go in there. So we're going to open up the gap there and do a valve adjustment. So guys, you can make your own wrenches. You can order originals from eBay or wherever, but I got these from Kent at Mercedes Source. And guys, I'm not really plugging Mercedes Source on this video. I like some of the stuff he sells. Here's his valve adjustment wrenches. You can see how the heads are turned, angled a little bit. And then he kind of, let's see if we can zoom in here. See how he kind of ground little notches in them there to make them slip on easier. And I really like these wrenches. Now let me explain how this works. So if we zoom in here, there we go. There's a silver nut, and below that is a black nut. What you want to do, those nuts are pressed up underneath the rocker arm right here. So in order to open up that gap between the rocker arm and the base of the cam lobe, we want to lower these down, meaning we want to turn them clockwise, and they will thread down the valve stem. So first, what we want to do, they're locked together. We want to hold the bottom one still and spin the top one counterclockwise. That will break loose the lock together. And then we want to spin the bottom one clockwise to go down the valve stem. And then we want to spin the top one clockwise to follow it and go down the valve stem. Now, these are very small movements, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to spin them down the valve stem, and that will open up the gap underneath there. So first thing I want to do, I'm going to put a wrench on that bottom, the black nut. There we go. We're gonna get it right. Sometimes a little tricky to get on there. There we go. We've got that one on the bottom one. We're gonna put this one on the top one. There we go. Now we wanna hold the black, we wanna go, let's see, clockwise with the bottom one, right? To spin it down, because clockwise tightens and it's gonna move down the threads. And then the top one, we're gonna go counterclockwise to move it up. That'll separate them. So I'm gonna squeeze these together. There we go. Those are now separated. Okay. Now notice I moved that bottom one all the way over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and follow it now with the top one, clockwise. Now, in essence, I've just moved both of them down. Now I didn't do it very much, but we're gonna go ahead and check our clearance and see if that's all it needed, because we're only talking about 0.10 millimeters. Okay, that's all it needed. It was barely out of adjustment. Let me show you. Okay, remember our feeler gauge wouldn't go under there. Now watch. See how it slips between them now? There we go. See how that slips? You want a little bit of drag. So that is 0.10 millimeter of a gap back there now. So what we want to do now is tighten these back up to lock them together. Now, guys, when you've done this, 100 times, you kind of get the feel for it. But we know our top nut is in the right place because we just checked it with our feeler gauge. So what we want to do is bring the bottom nut up to meet it. So we need to turn the bottom nut counterclockwise to bring it up to lock against that top nut. So we're going to spin the bottom one counterclockwise. All right, now we're going to squeeze them tight. All right, those are now locked back in place, and we want to confirm our adjustment, because sometimes when you tighten them back up, you can accidentally close it up a little bit. So we're going to check that now. I'm just going back. You saw me do it earlier. Perfect. That slides in there like butter. That is a perfect valve adjustment. Let me show you guys that. This is how you want it. A little bit of drag. I just feel a little drag when I put that in there. That's perfect. All right, so we are done with that one. Now, I've showed how to do it, and I'm not going to show all 10 of them, guys, because that's a lot of work to record and edit me doing 10 times. So some of these aren't going to be out of adjustment. Some are. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to rotate the engine to the next one. And let's see which is the next one. We've already done that one. Let's look for a cam lobe that's almost up to our dot. No. Look at that one right there. That is almost up. See our dot right there? So we're going to move back to the number 1 valve. And what is the number 1 valve? It's EX. It's an exhaust. So we're going to check that one with our 0.35. So I'll go ahead and rotate it. I'll check it. If it needs adjustment, I'm not going to record that. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to knock out the rest of these, and I'll tell you what I found when I'm done. I'll show you what it's like to rotate the engine, and you guys can watch this number 1 cam lobe right here. See, it's pointed at like the 11 o'clock right now. I'm going to rotate the engine. I want you guys to watch that turn. All right, did y'all see it move? We are now perfectly lined up with that dot. I had to rotate that crankshaft. I had to move the breaker bar down there about 6 to 8 inches, maybe a little more, maybe 10 inches to move it that much. All right, let's do our adjustment. This is a 0.35 millimeter. All right, that one's also a little tight. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that. I'll be back in a second to show you after the adjustment. Okay, went ahead, loosened up our nuts and made an adjustment. And look at that. See how that feeler gauge slips right in there? Now that required barely any adjustment. So I'm guessing this was probably coming up on the time frame to do a valve adjustment, which is around 15 to 20,000 miles. Guys, I usually do it a little higher, around 25,000 miles, because at this mileage, this one has almost 60,000 miles on it. And after you've done a few valve adjustments, these tend to settle in and they don't need as much adjustments as they do, when it would be brand new. So I'm going to go ahead, knock this one or tighten this one out or tighten this one up and then finish the rest of these. Okay, so I just finished up on 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5 here, and number 5, that's an exhaust. I just got that one adjusted. Let's get our feeler gauge in there. Yeah, there you go. You can see that gauge now goes in there very smoothly. So I'm done with the valve adjustment, and I've ticked off all of them that I've adjusted, and they all needed a very minor adjustment. Maybe like, I think they were maybe like 0.01, 0.02 millimeters out. So my guess is this car had just started to come up on its mileage cycle to have the valve adjustments done. So now it's probably, you know, I would recommend not doing it for another 20 to 25,000 miles. Now, you will see online, don't believe everything you see online. A lot of people are like, do it every 13 or 12 or 13,000 miles. And that's nonsense. From my experience, it's around 20 to 25,000 miles, and then they will need to be adjusted. So don't do it too soon. It's not required. But now that all these are perfectly in spec, you know, when I test drove the car, when I picked it up, it ran great. But now we're going to get just a little more power because those valves, the exhaust and intake, are going to be opening up slightly at better timing, and we're going to get a little better combustion and a little more power. So next thing we want to do is put on our fresh valve cover gasket and reassemble everything. But first, I want to go ahead and clean up our valve cover in the parts washer. And ignore this. This is a pan from a completely different vehicle. I'll just set that aside here. But let's go ahead, get this stuff in the parts washer, and get this thing cleaned up. And it's really not that dirty, but it's probably never been cleaned. Oh yeah, look at that. Now this is originally cast aluminum. I see a lot of guys polish these to give it like a chrome finish, and please don't do that. These cars were cast aluminum from the factory, and it just looks better in my opinion if they're all factory original and not polished like some people do. So let me go ahead and just finish cleaning this up, and we'll get our new valve cover gasket on and get this installed back in the vehicle. All right, let's get this dried off. Oh yeah, this cleaned up really, really nicely. Yeah, these are all cast aluminum from the factory. Look how nice this cleaned up. All right, let me get the gasket on. Check that out. You can still make out the original factory stamping on the back. I think it says 491. And I've seen that on a few low mileage cars. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it means it was number 491 they produced that year or that month. I don't know, but it's cool that it's still visible on here. Okay, these valve cover gaskets are a little tedious to put on. They take a minute, so I'll probably put this in fast motion and you guys can watch that. All right, we have our valve cover gasket on, and guys, it's interesting. Sometimes these cars will fight you a little bit, even though they're the same make and model. Some cars will fight you a little bit, and this one seems to just be going together so easily. That valve cover gasket didn't fight me at all. Okay, let's get this valve cover back on the car. And now that I said that, I probably jinxed myself, but let's get this back on. So, tricky part, I need to get around that up here, and we need to move this out of the way, and then that one injector line right there. Oh my God, yeah, this car is just not fighting me at all. Normally that takes me a few minutes, and this just went straight down on there. Okay, so what I like to do now, once I put it on there, is just go around with a flashlight and make sure that gasket didn't roll under anywhere, especially on the back. And it looks good so far. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, good. Let's go ahead, put our bolts back on here, and off camera, I'll go ahead and reassemble everything and lubricate our throttle linkage. And then we'll fire this thing up and see how it runs with our new valve adjustment. Now, when you tighten these down, guys, you do not crank these down. The gasket does all of your sealing. You just want to snug them up. All right. That's it. That's it, guys. You don't crank those down. It's, 10, 15 foot-pounds of torque. All right, guys, here's 3 of the bolts. There's one on the car holding the top throttle linkage in. Now, these are steel bolts that are going into an aluminum valve cover. So because of dissimilar metals, you can get some corrosion. So I want to go ahead and coat these with anti-seize before installing them, and that'll make sure these never have an issue in the next, 40 years. All right, I'm gonna do the one that's in the car too, but let me go ahead and install these. Here you go. These are just the bolts that hold your valve cover, your linkage to your valve cover. And that little coating of anti-seize will make these go into that aluminum real smooth, and they'll never get any corrosion. And we're just putting the last one in here. This anti-seize, guys, it's messy, but it's good stuff. I like to start these by hand because it is going into aluminum and you don't want to cross thread anything. All right, let me zip those down. Now you just snug these up. You just snug them up. You don't have to go crazy tight with these because they're actually not under any force. That's it. Now I got to reconnect my vacuum lines up here, and I want to lubricate all this linkage. I'm also putting back on our E-clip. Let's see if I can do this without dropping it. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, now I want to go ahead and put some automatic transmission fluid on all these little ball pivots here. We'll reconnect our vacuum lines here first. Those just go right into the front of the engine, or the front, like that. There we go. All right, let me lubricate all these. Okay, I like to use automatic transmission fluid when I'm lubricating the linkage. And the main reason is that doesn't collect dust as much as grease does. I've seen some guys put grease on there and the grease just gets really dirty. And all I do, I'll put it in a syringe. Let me wipe that one off there a little bit. And then I just squirt it down in here, and you'll get transmission fluid on some stuff. It doesn't matter, it doesn't hurt anything. And then we're gonna put that back on there. And you wanna clamp it in place with some channel locks. There we go. There we go. And that'll be nice and lubricated and spin freely. So I got to do this to all of these linkages up here. I'll just show you a couple and then I'll be back in a second. There we go. That moves nice now. We'll do this injection pump linkage right down here. Like I said, you're going to squirt transmission fluid on some stuff. Don't worry, that does not hurt anything. Okay, nice. That just makes it move way smoother and have less resistance. Go ahead and get this one over here, cruise control actuator. All right, we got to swing that one around and go right on there like that. Oh, yeah, beautiful. All right, I want to do this one and these two back here. And then also I'm going to drop a little lubrication on the pivot points. Right there and right there. Now it's going to get transmission fluid down here. That's okay, guys. Now, Mercedes specifically says do not lubricate this nylon bushing right here. This bushing rides in a little channel here. And they specifically say do not lubricate that. So we don't put any oil on that. All right, wipe that off some. And we need to run our Bowden cable back through here and reattach, lubricate that. So let me finish up here. I'll be back in a second. Okay, got everything nice and lubricated. Let me wipe off a little of the transmission fluid from under there. There we go. And everything is very smooth now. See, everything actuates very, very smooth. Now, next thing I want to do, we want to go ahead and set our Bowden cable adjustment. Now, what you can see there's a tab right here. Here's our Bowden cable that controls the shift points. When you pull your throttle linkage, that tab causes the Bowden cable to move. Now, you want about 1 millimeter of play between the lever and that tab. See, right now, it's all the way up against it. There's not a lot of play. So the way you do that, you can turn this adjustment nut right here. There we go. Let's go back a little bit. There we go. That's right where you want it. You want a little play right there. You can see there's a very small gap before it makes contact. That's our baseline, and we can adjust it later after the test drive if I want to change at what RPM the gears shift. All right, guys, let me go ahead and reattach our breather hose here. Just one thing I want to point out on this car that's pretty remarkable is that's the original installation on the breather hose. It also has the original zip tie that holds it in place to this little tab here. I mean, this stuff is usually always, rotten or gone. But we move that back, and then this zip tie goes right around that little thing, and we'll zip tie that back down. And this is going to go right here. All right, let me tighten that back down here. The Germans just made such nice stuff back in the days. I mean, these zip ties are reusable. You can open them up and close them and reuse them. There we go. Spin that around. Actually, I'm going to rotate it around here to tuck that down there. There we go. And that holds that in place. Okay, we are officially done with the valve adjustment. And yeah, look how beautiful this is. That is an original Survivor, guys. This zinc plating is just remarkable on here. It looks great. So what I want to tackle next is right here. This is pretty common on these cars. You see where some of the paint has come off right here and right here on your air filter housing lid, your air filter lid. I want to go ahead, pop this off, sand that down, and then I want to respray this lid to protect it and plus to make it look really nice. See where a little paint is chipped off and we have some surface rust appearing right there. So let's go ahead and pop this off and start that process. Actually, guys, I'm sorry, I forgot. Before we start that process, let's go ahead and fire up the engine and see how it runs with our fresh valve adjustment. Now, this engine hasn't been cranked in probably 2 or 3 weeks since I sent off the wood trim to Madeira. So we are definitely, this is going to be a very cold start. And let's see how she runs. Fired up immediately. That is awesome. I mean, it fired up in like half a second. Yeah, this is a remarkable engine, guys. Look how smooth this idle is. I mean, I can't even see the engine shaking at all. Yeah, that is what a extremely healthy 617 engine looks like. All right, let's go ahead and shut her down, and I want to start on this air cleaner housing lid. So not only is the engine startup and how it idles important, engine shutoff is also important too. Let's watch the engine shutoff. And guys, what I was looking for there, when I turn that key, it sends a vacuum signal to pull the fuel shutoff. And that should happen within 2 seconds of turning that key. And a super healthy engine, you're usually around ½ second to 1 second, which is what this car is. We have a beautiful shutoff. So I'm actually gonna come back tomorrow and start on the air filter housing lid. And I'm just really excited about the engine and how it runs. These really low mileage 617 engines are just really amazing. And I enjoy working on them, and they're just so nice. Anyway, I'll see you in like 2 seconds when we're refinishing the air filter housing lid. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and refinish this lid. And you just take this off with a 10 millimeter. And we'll just set this aside. I've already undone our clips on the front, and I got a clip back here on the back. And then this just pulls right off of here. All right, we can set this just temporarily right over there. And we'll get our lid off. And the air cleaner, yeah, that's a fresh air cleaner. I can't remember if I changed that or if the previous owner did, but I can clearly see it's a brand new air cleaner and it does not need to be changed. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to sand down these little areas right here and refinish these areas of the lid. This is a very common issue that happens on these old diesels. Get a little spotting of surface rust. So let's go ahead and fix that. All right, the way you clean this up, this doesn't look too bad, so I have some 240 grit sandpaper. And we just want to, there you go, get the surface rust off. You can see how I exposed the metal right there? It's just very mild surface rust. So we want to sand this off and get to the metal part, and then I'll probably go over it again with like a 400 or 600 to smooth it out, and then we'll repaint that. Yeah, that's coming right off, no problem. See, I just hit another spot right there. So it's barely even on there. Okay, I've got all those little spots sanded down. Also, I want to take out our rubber grommet. We're just going to set this aside. And now I'm going to go ahead and just clean this off in the parts washer. This will just get any of that sanding dust off of here. All right, good. You can see where, let's see if I can get it up closer. Yeah, see all the little surface rust spots we sanded off here? Right there. And now we'll just wipe it down with some acetone to get it real dry. And I'll respray this with the original factory semi-gloss black. The parts washer does leave like a little bit of film behind. So acetone, there you go. This is just a solvent. Make sure that there's no grease or oils or anything on there. It'll get it super dry and very clean and ready for paint. All right, now I'm gonna have to take this inside down in the basement because it's a little chilly out here, and for the paint to go on there correctly, we need it a little warmer, and it's about 70 degrees inside. So I'm gonna go paint this inside, and we'll let it sit for a couple hours, and I'll be back in a second and you'll see the finished product. There we go. Before we go to paint, you can see how we got off that little surface rust there. Okay, it's been a couple of hours. This is pretty much dry. I hit it with several coats, and you can see how nice it looks now. All those little surface rust spots are gone, and it is freshly coated with the original factory semi-gloss black. All right, so let's put a little grommet back in here and reinstall it on the car. And guys, I thought I was going to be able to do the radio and the wood trim in this video, but I'm going to go ahead and separate out that into another video. So let's go ahead, install this on here. I'll show you the final product with the refinished air cleaner housing lid, and then stay tuned for the next video. All right guys, our air filter housing is dry enough. Now we want to put our grommet back in here, and that's just a press fit. I'm actually going to stick it in from the back side here, and you just kind of wedge it down in there. There we go. And we're gonna put this around here. Whoop, I need to take my nut off of here. All right, and we're going to stick our breather tube back on here, and this just presses around there. All right, there we go. There we go, guys. Doesn't that look much better? We had those little rusty spots that were down in there, and that is now refinished and looks beautiful. All right, guys, that's going to finish up this video. Like I said, next video, I'll show the wood trim and the radio installation. So we'll see you next time.